Well, hey there, friends. I'm your host, Penny, and this is Criminally Nerdy. How are you doing, dearest, gentle listener? Sorry, I just finished Bridgerton. I'm not going to say much in case there's anyone who hasn't finished, but damn. Shonda Rhimes knows how to pull on my heartstrings in a way that is only rivaled by George R.R. Martin. In a much different way, of course. Speaking of, yes, I watched the season premiere of House of Dragon, and no, I am not ready to talk about it right now. So yeah, let's press on and all go out there and have incredible weeks, even if our tender hearts in a blender, at the hands of the shows we love. In podcast news, I'm excited to let you know that after a lot of research and a little encouragement, I have started a Buy Me a Coffee page. You can find it at buymeacoffee.com/criminallynerdypodcast, which I will link in the show notes. Buy Me a Coffee is a one-time donation, not a subscription. You can donate anonymously. The website will ask for your email address, but it's not shared with me. Or you can leave your name and I'll give you a shout out. You can also send me messages through the site, like the one I just received from Quan telling me that I have lint in my belly button. Thank you. I have several questions for you, Quanny Face. Donations will go towards offsetting things like equipment, research costs, hosting fees, all that yada yada. Sometimes it will go towards coffee because every now and then I do have to pull an all-nighter to make sure you guys get your content on time. And I am far from the days where I can do that naturally, so I require serious help in the form of caffeine. And every now and then it might just go towards a beer to help me unwind after a long week. If you can make a donation, that would be awesome. If you can't, it's totally fine. The podcast will still be here, and I will still love you. As always, my goal is to bring you content on a regular and someday more frequent basis. I'm taking steps that I'll be sharing soon, but as of now, aside from collectively manifesting and making donations, the best way to support the show is to help it grow by subscribing, rating, reviewing, and most of all, telling other true crime lovers about the awesomeness that is Criminally Nerdy. Speaking of reviewing, I just learned that the star ratings are great, but written reviews are also kind of a big deal. The more you know. So if you have a moment to write a few words wherever you're listening, I would really appreciate it. This episode is airing on June 24th, which, as I mentioned last week, is the National Women's Strike in response to the second anniversary of the overturning of Roe v. Wade, advocating for reproductive freedom, equal rights, and the fight to end gender-based violence. If you cannot participate by missing school or work, make sure to wear something red in solidarity. If you are able to participate and plan to attend a march in your area, be safe, stay hydrated, and wear your sunscreen, dang it. No one likes sunburns. Today is also Midsummer Day, Fairy Day, Praline Day, and Swim a Lap Day. So, call into work. Embrace the Midsummer Day by cooling off with a lap or two. After the sun is set, wind down, eat some pralines, and watch Fern Gully. Your boss knows damn good and well that you should be poolside snacking instead of in an office stressing. Though our Pride Month is coming to an end, I must say again, our fight continues. I credit Elle Duran, whose pronouns are they, she, for the most current update I've found. In the U.S., there are nearly 600 anti-LGBTQ+ bills in over 40 states circulating as we speak. Worldwide, there are over 60 countries that have national laws criminalizing the LGBTQ+ community. 12 of those countries impose the death penalty. Let that sink in as long as you need. Today, we will be discussing the unbelievably sad story of a bright young man whose heartbreaking death shocked the nation and became one of the most well-known cases in LGBTQ+ history. The details revealed about his untimely end changed hearts, minds, and even laws for decades to come. His name became a battle cry to stand up and fight for justice, equality, and protection for the gay community. This is the case of Matthew Shepard. Please be warned, this one is rough and will probably fuck your day up. This case will cover sexual assault, torture, and murder. I will also be discussing hate speech. Though it makes my skin crawl, I will be using words I hate so as to not take away from the vitriol in which they were used. I strongly recommend you have tissues on hand and maybe be close to someone you want to hug. Some of my sources for this episode were The Advocate, The Guardian, NPR, Morbid Podcast, You're Wrong About Podcast, Your Angry Neighborhood Feminist Podcast, and the 2023 documentary, The Matthew Shepard Story, An American Hate Crime. It was a crisp fall morning on October 7, 1998, when Officer Reggie Flutie was dispatched to a rural road in Laramie, Wyoming. 19-year-old cyclist and University of Wyoming student Aaron Kreifels had been riding along when he hit something and fell off of his bike. As he got up to brush himself off, he noticed that something was tied to a log fence post. Initially, he figured it was a scarecrow or Halloween decoration, neither of which would be uncommon in the area in October. Hell, I put my scarecrow up in September. I'm kidding. It's a skeleton. Unfortunately, wiping out wasn't going to be the worst part of Aaron's day. When he looked closer, he realized that it was not a decoration at all. It was a person covered in blood and dirt. When Officer Flutie arrived, she could not drive all the way up to the fence. From the distance, she thought she was looking at the body of a child. She could see blood covering his head and chest, which she noticed was still gently rising. She radioed for backup and rushed to help him. As she was approaching, she noticed that a deer was laying next to the boy. It stood out because deer are usually skittish around people, but this one stayed until Officer Flutie got to him, almost as if it had been watching over. She quickly realized that the body was not that of a child, but of a young man. He didn't have shoes on and was dressed in everyday clothes. She could tell that he had been out here for some time, which was an added concern because temperatures overnight would dip below freezing. He was on his back, bound at the wrists, and tied to a fence post. She cut him down and began trying to clear his airway to make it easier for him to breathe. She could see that he had been brutally beaten. The only part of his face that wasn't covered in blood were 2 trails on his cheeks where his tears had washed it away. Officer Flutie later said that while waiting for the ambulance to arrive, she had this feeling that she just wanted this man to live. She was not only determined that he was going to make it to the hospital, but she wanted him to feel her presence. Though unresponsive, she kept telling him that she was there and he was not alone. The ambulance arrived and took the young man to Ivinson Memorial Hospital in Laramie, where they did their best to tend to his injuries. He was on the smaller side at 5'3" and around 110 pounds, which is why Officer Flutie first thought he was a child. He had multiple injuries to his head and face, which had resulted in 4 skull fractures, one of which had crushed his brainstem and torn his right ear almost completely off. He had several small lacerations to his head, face, neck, and hands. He also had bruises to his groin where he had been kicked between the legs. He would later be transferred to the Poudre Valley Hospital in Fort Collins, Colorado, who were better equipped to deal with this severe head trauma. Sheriff Dave O'Malley said it was the worst crime scene he had ever seen in his career. He would later admit that in truth, he had never been very kind towards the gay community. He acknowledged that he in fact would make derogatory and offensive comments about them and sometimes to them. But this scene left him forever changed. He said, quote, "It's absurd that it took something this tragic for it to hit me." There was blood splattered as far as 50 feet from where the body had been found. There were footprints, tire tracks, and multiple drag marks from where the victim had tried to get away but was repeatedly brought back where he had been beaten so severely that it could not be described as anything other than torture. Who was this man? Who did this to him? And why? One question was quickly answered, and the others wouldn't be far behind. At the scene, his University of Wyoming student ID was found. Their victim was 21-year-old Matthew Shepard. Matthew Wayne Shepard was born December 1st, 1976, to Dennis and Judy Shepard in Casper, Wyoming. He went by Matt to his friends and family. He was the oldest of 2 sons, his little brother Logan coming along in 1981. The boys were really close, which gives me so much hope because I have 2 sons who are 5 years apart and they draw the majority of their enjoyment from picking on each other. They're young though, so I'm sure they'll bond over the memories of terrorizing each other when they're older. Though they were close, Matt and Logan were total opposites. Matt was short, slender, and very outgoing, while Logan was tall, athletic, and kept more to himself. His mother Judy recalls that he was a very sweet child. He loved to draw and write poems. He would actually write poems and leave them in his neighbors' mailboxes. When he found out that he wasn't supposed to leave things in mailboxes without a stamp, instead of being a little rebel like most kids would, he decided instead that he would look for pretty rocks and leave those. Judy says that she knew Matt was gay from a young age, though he wouldn't come out until he was much older. She never pressured him, knowing that he would talk to her when he was ready. His parents always encouraged Matt to be his authentic self, including letting him dress up as Dolly Parton for Halloween several years in a row. He loved the costume so much that he would just wear it randomly. Though it may seem common now to let your children express themselves in this way, it was a pretty progressive thing in the 80s. Kudos to Judy and Dennis. Matt was teased a little bit in school because he was smaller than most boys his age, but for the most part, people were drawn to his kindness and he was overall well-liked. In fact, he was elected as peer counselor and voted friendliest in his high school class. In Matt's junior year of high school, his father, an oil rig inspector, was offered a position with Saudi Aramco. That summer, the family packed up and moved to Saudi Arabia. Dennis and Judy were excited about having the opportunity to let their boys experience life outside of Wyoming and have the chance to better relate to other cultures. There wasn't an American school in the area where the family had moved, so for his senior year, Matt attended a boarding school called the American School in Switzerland. He participated in theater as well as taking German and Italian courses. He made lots of friends as he did everywhere he went and absolutely loved it there. He also kept in touch with his friends back home in Wyoming. Many of his friends later said that everyone knew Matt was gay, but being good friends, no one ever pressured him to admit it. They waited for him to tell them when he felt ready. During his second semester of senior year, he and a group of friends took part in a program at school that let students travel abroad, choosing Morocco as their destination. They were having a great night until one night, Matt went out to take a walk, which friends said was a very Matt thing to do. He loved taking in the sights and the culture, as well as visiting local shops. Matt banged on the door of his friend's room in the middle of the night. He was shirtless, disheveled, and sobbing. He said that on the way back to the hotel, he was surrounded by several men, pulled away, beaten, robbed, and raped. His parents were notified and it was reported to the authorities in Morocco, but the assailants were never caught. Matt was severely traumatized by the experience. He lost any sense of safety he had after such a horrific violation. It shook him to his core and took a serious toll on his mental health, leading him to suffer from depressive episodes and panic attacks in the years to come. After graduation, Matt moved back to the United States, where he started his freshman year at Catawba College in North Carolina. He was still struggling, but was doing everything he could to overcome. He met regularly with his school counselor, Walt Bolden. In addition to working through his mental health issues, Walt was the first person Matt came out to. Walt was a gay man himself, so he helped Matt with his concerns about coming out to his parents. Though they had raised him in a supportive environment, he confided that he was still afraid that they would disown him. The 90s were a booming time for LGBTQ+ visibility. Queer characters were portrayed positively on several major shows at the time, like Roseanne, Melrose Place, and ER. Celebrities like Ellen DeGeneres, Melissa Etheridge, George Michael, and Nathan Lane came out publicly. Though it was starting to feel safer, it was and still can be very scary to come out. With Walt's guidance, Matt found the courage to come out to his mother during his freshman year of college. Much to his relief, she met him with nothing but love and acceptance. He asked her not to tell his father because he wanted to do it himself. In a move that I usually wouldn't approve of, she warned him ahead of time. Coming out is a very personal thing, but I'm going to give Judy a pass because she had the purest of intentions. Though she knew, and Dennis had likely suspected, Matt had never admitted it. She didn't want Dennis to be caught off guard and accidentally say something that would damage their relationship. When Matt came out to his dad, he said, "Dad, I have something important to tell you. I'm gay." And his father responded with, "Okay, what's the important thing you needed to tell me?" Dennis didn't care that Matt was gay, only that he was happy. Matt was his son and he loved him. That was that, and that is how it should always be. With the relief of knowing he had his parents' acceptance, Matt began to feel a bit more comfortable and came out to a few close friends. Matt was still struggling with bouts of depression which were noticeable to his family and friends. While navigating his way through life, he spent some time at Casper College in Wyoming before settling on the University of Wyoming. It was here where the dark clouds finally started to lift. Matt had been interested in politics from a young age, so it was no surprise when he chose political science as his major, with a minor in languages. He was making new friends and became involved in clubs on campus. He created a mentoring program for students transitioning into campus life, chosen as the student representative for the Wyoming Environmental Council, and joined the LGBTQ club. His father described him as an optimistic and accepting young man who had a special gift of relating to almost everyone. He was the type of person who was very approachable and always looked to new challenges. He had a great passion for equality and always stood up for acceptance of people's differences. His new surroundings had a profound impact on his well-being. Not only had he confided in his friends that he was finally starting to feel safe, but he was finding a sense of fulfillment by taking part in things he was passionate about. The LGBTQ club met on Tuesdays. It was here where he met Jim Osborne and Romaine Patterson, both of whom remember Matt for his incredible, beaming smile. At their weekly meeting on October 6, 1998, the club discussed the events and celebrations they had planned for the upcoming Gay Awareness Week. After the meeting, several members, including Matt, went to the Village Inn for dinner. After dinner, Matt wanted to go grab a beer. He asked if anyone would like to join, but everyone either had plans or was ready to call it a night, so he decided to kick it solo. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, Matt went to the Fireside Bar. It wasn't a gay bar. Laramie didn't have one of those. But gay people went there on a regular basis and weren't given any trouble. The bartender recognized Matt as he came in occasionally. Sometimes with friends, sometimes on his own. He said Matt liked to come in on nights when it was slower. He had never caused any problems. He would usually hang out and have a beer or two before heading home. The bar was a little busier than usual that night, but when 21-year-old Aaron McKinney and 21-year-old Russell Henderson came in between 10 or 11 o'clock that night, they stood out to the bartender because they paid for their pitcher of beer with nickels and dimes. They were both roofers, so the nature of their work was sporadic. That's completely understandable. They wanted a beer at the end of a day. I totally get that. I would never, ever talk shit about someone having to pay however they're able because their work is inconsistent, and I'm certainly not going to judge anyone for wanting a beer at the end of the day. Do what you gotta do, folks. Hell, I'm going to need a beer after this episode, and I'm recording at 5 a.m. That or I'm going to need to call my therapist and pay for the session in buy me a coffee money. So I'm not going to say anything about their method of payment, but I'm going to talk a lot of shit about these two douchebags. A lot. And who are they, you may wonder? Aaron McKinney's father was a long-haul trucker who was rarely home. At some point, his parents divorced and he primarily lived with his mother. His mother passed away during a hysterectomy surgery. Aaron was awarded with either life insurance, a settlement from a malpractice suit, or both. I'm unsure of the amount, but whatever it was didn't last long. It was rumored that he struggled with drug addiction and that a significant amount was spent feeding that habit. Aaron had dropped out of high school and had spent time in a juvenile detention center for stealing money from a cash register, and on this night, he was currently awaiting sentencing for robbing a Kentucky Fried Chicken and making off with $2,500. He had just recently had a baby with his girlfriend, Kristen. He was known to get into fights a lot, was openly racist and homophobic, and was just generally regarded as an asshole. Russell Henderson was born to a teenage mother who struggled with alcoholism. His father was not in the picture. His mother dealt with domestic violence from multiple partners, which he witnessed as a child. It has been reported that one or more of those partners assaulted Russell as well. Russell had also dropped out of high school. He was said to have been quiet and very much a follower. He got into his share of trouble, but his record was slightly less aggressive than Aaron's, mostly centering around DUIs and other driving-related issues. Back to the bar. Aaron and Russell see Matt and assume he must have money. They know Matt is gay, as most people did, so they decide that they are going to pretend to be gay, lure him out of the bar, and rob him. Matt was very friendly and would talk to almost anyone, so unbeknownst to Aaron and Russell, it wouldn't have been hard to find themselves in his good graces even if they hadn't pretended to be gay. The bartender remembers the three leaving the bar together, which he found odd as he hadn't seen them talking earlier in the night. The three climbed into the Ford pickup truck that Aaron McKinney had borrowed from his father, with Russell driving, Matt in the middle, and Aaron in the passenger seat. At some point during the drive, Aaron pulls a gun on him and says to Matt, "We're not gay, you're getting jacked." Though Matt willingly handed him his wallet, Aaron began hitting him in the head with the butt of a Smith & Wesson .357 revolver repeatedly. When they reached an isolated area, they pulled over and drug Matt out of the truck. Matt struggled and was able to get away, from the appearance of the drag marks at the scene, more than once, but the men were relentless. Aaron beat him mercilessly and then told Russell to get a rope from the truck so that they could tie him up. Russell does not hit Matt, but does not do anything to stop the attack and helps Aaron tie him to the fence. Once Matt is tied to the fence, Aaron continues to attack him, beating him both with the gun and his fists. The men then force Matt to tell them his address and taunt him that they are going to go rob his home. Aaron realizes that the way the truck is parked, Matt could probably see the license plate, so he tells Matt to read the plate out loud. When he complies, Aaron hits him one more time, knocking him unconscious. Now done torturing the defenseless man, as a last insult, they took his shoes. Aaron and Russell then left Matt, tied to the fence, severely injured and badly bleeding, with nothing to protect him from the freezing Wyoming night. This is where Matt would stay for an agonizing 18 hours before he was discovered. If you were hoping these asshats were done for the night, I'm going to disappoint you. After leaving Matt to die and taking his shoes and wallet with them, which, by the way, had a whopping $20 in it. $20 that he voluntarily handed over. But I guess that wasn't enough, so they head back into town and got into a fight with 19-year-old Emiliano Morales and 18-year-old Jeremy Herrera. The teens recalled that these two fuckfaces just jumped them out of nowhere. Emilio was hit in the head with the same revolver that Matt had been hit with and required 21 staples in his head. Jeremy hit Aaron with a stick to try to fight him off and protect his friend. Aaron and Russell ran away, but the hit from Jeremy had given Aaron a hairline fracture in his skull to remember him by. Sometime around 1 a.m., a Laramie resident woke up and said he heard a hissing sound. He went outside to find that his tires had been slashed, so he called police to report it. Officer Flint Walters arrived and began looking around the neighborhood for whoever had caused the property damage. It's never stated that Aaron and Russell were the ones that slashed the tire, but I'm going to assume they did because they're the literal worst. Officer Walters sees two men in a black pickup truck and notes that they're acting strangely. When he flashes his lights at them to stop and question them, they look at each other and sprint off in opposite directions. Russell Henderson was caught and charged with evading police, but Aaron was able to get away. There was blood on Russell's clothing and a gash on his lip. He says that he and Aaron had been jumped. Something tells me it was the other way around, you sack of fucking garbage. The officer looks inside the truck and notices that there's blood splatter and a bloody Smith & Wesson gun. There is also a very nice pair of shoes which stood out to him based on how Russell and Aaron were dressed. And lastly, he found a bank card with the name Matthew Shepard. Just hours later, on October 7th, Matt's name goes out over police scanners as the man identified as the victim found in Laramie. Officer Walters had already felt like there was something more going on with the two men from the tire-slashing call than met the eye because of the strange items found in the truck and the way they ran. Now, he was certain. With Russell already in custody, he is questioned about Matt's attack. He wouldn't admit to anything and quickly lawyered up. They finally find Aaron, and it turns out he's in the Poudre Valley Hospital receiving treatment for the head injury he received from Jeremy. Investigators go to the hospital to speak with Aaron. They question him about the truck and its contents, and his story is very simple. He said that after getting beaten up, his truck was stolen, so he didn't know anything about the strange items. Super weird since Officer Walters just saw you in it, but go on lying, Aaron. As they are questioning him, they receive word that Matthew Shepard is being transferred to the same hospital. At one point, he was in the ICU only 4 doors down from his attacker. Unfortunately, there wasn't much more investigators could do with Aaron at that time, so they decided that their next stop would be to talk to the men's girlfriends. They bring in 18-year-old Kristen Price, Aaron's girlfriend, and 20-year-old Chastity Paisley, Russell's girlfriend, for questioning. Chastity, like Russell, didn't have anything to say other than that Russell had been home with her watching movies the night before. Kristen didn't have much to say at first either, other than that Aaron had been home watching movies with her. But when she was presented with the evidence that had already been gathered and learned about the true brutality of the crime, they could tell she was shocked. Investigators told her that if she knew anything, her cooperation would go a long way in helping her situation, reminding her that she had a baby at home to think about. Kristen breaks down and admits to detectives that the night before, Aaron had crawled through the window, covered in blood, and himself bleeding from the ear. It is assumed that he arrived home after the attack on Matthew, Jeremy, and Emilio, which is why he was bleeding. He told her that he thought he had killed a gay man that night, and even told her about their plan of pretending to be gay themselves to lure him out of the bar. While he was washing himself off, she saw him washing off a bloody wallet too, which he then put inside of a dirty diaper and threw in the trash. Russell, Chastity, Kristen, and Aaron sat down and decided that they needed to get their story straight. Their story would be that after having some drinks at the fireside bar, they came home and watched movies with the girls. They also decided that they needed to get rid of the evidence. The guys left, likely planning to clean the blood out of the truck and dispose of the gun, Matthew's shoes, and Matthew's bank card. The girls were going to get rid of the bloody clothes. At first, they were going to burn them, but it was too cold outside. So instead, they disposed of the clothes in a dumpster in the town of Cheyenne. They forgot about Russell's boots, though, so they hid them in a shed. Law enforcement acts fast. They are able to find the bloody clothes, the boots, and the wallet in the diaper, which had Matthew Shepard's identification inside. By the afternoon of October 7th, Russell was charged with attempted first-degree murder, kidnapping, and aggravated robbery. Kristen and Chastity are arrested and charged with accessory after the fact to attempted first-degree murder. Aaron was released from the hospital 2 days later, on October 9th, and agreed to be extradited back to Wyoming. In his first interview, Aaron wouldn't admit to anything at all, but after investigators let him get some sleep, he told them everything. He admitted to pretending to be gay to lure Matt out and rob him. When asked if he had to take Matt's wallet by force, he admitted that he willingly handed it over. They questioned, "Then why did you hit him?" He says that when he pulled out the gun to rob him, Matt grabbed his leg and his genitals in an attempt to come onto him, which caused him to lose it and start beating him. That's pretty fucking bold. Not many people would be in the middle of getting robbed at gunpoint and decide, you know what, now's a good time to make a move. Aaron would later admit that Matt never put his hand on his leg or made any advances towards him. He admitted to dragging him back after he had tried to get away, tying him to the fence, and beating him repeatedly. When asked if Matthew had said anything or asked him to stop, he said, quote, "Well, yeah, he was getting the shit kicked out of him. Most of all, he was screaming." Aaron states that Russell never hit Matt as far as he knew, but was giggling through the whole assault and did help in dragging him and tying him up. He admitted to having Matt read the license plate and hitting him as hard as he could in the hopes that he had either killed him or beaten the memory out of him. When investigators asked if he thought Matt was dead when he left, he nonchalantly said that he assumed he was, and even told his girlfriend when he got home that he was, here comes the word, pretty sure he had killed a fag, which Kristen had already confirmed in her interview. Aaron had already gotten his wallet, which is what this piece of shit said was his reason for targeting Matt. Matt was tied, defenseless, and screaming for him to stop, so investigators had to know and asked several times, then why beat him so brutally and repeatedly? His answer was, "I just lost it. I blacked out." Oh, okay, yeah, so you blacked out, but you remember all of these details? That tracks. Aaron showed absolutely no remorse through his interview, just completely indifferent about the fact that he had committed such a monstrous act of violence against another human being. After the questioning was done, he was also charged with attempted first-degree murder, kidnapping, and aggravated robbery. All four involved pled not guilty. News had not only spread around town, but it had gone national. Matt had stayed close with his former counselor, Walt. When he and Matt's friends heard about what had happened, they were worried that it would get spun as a robbery gone wrong, and they were determined not to let that happen. Walt called surrounding towns to make sure that this was being reported for what it was, a hate crime. Walt remembers that he got a call from the Washington Post the very next day. A media storm descended on Laramie. Matt's friends and activists across the nation began speaking out. Sheriff Gary Poles pulled zero punches in his press conference about Matthew's attack, stating that he did in fact believe it was a hate crime. The entire nation was talking about the shocking details of the young gay man who had been targeted, viciously beaten, tied to a fence, and left for dead. The only people who didn't know the details were Matt's parents. Judy and Dennis were still living in Saudi Arabia. As soon as Matt was identified, they received a call at 5 o'clock in the morning their time. When the phone rang, they assumed it was Matt because it was around the usual time he would call them. Unfortunately, on the other end of the phone, it was the hospital in Laramie saying that their son had been seriously injured and the doctors weren't sure if he was going to make it through the night. They just assumed he'd been in a car accident or something. They didn't have time to consider scenarios because they were springing into action to get home. Getting back from Saudi Arabia is no quick journey, so even with them acting as fast as they possibly could, it took them 50 hours before they landed in the United States. It was there where they were met by Matt's aunt and told the truth of what had happened to their son. She told them immediately because the news was everywhere and she didn't want them finding out that way. They arrived at the hospital and were told the extent of his injuries. The damage to his brainstem had disrupted his body's ability to regulate vital functions. The injuries were too severe for doctors to operate. He was in a coma and on life support. His family was advised that even if he survived the injuries, he would be in a vegetative state. Doctors offered them what little comfort they could by telling them that Matt was not in any pain. The devastating news still did not prepare his parents for the soul-shattering moment when they saw their son. He had been beaten so severely that he had been disfigured. Judy said that the only way she was able to tell that it was her son was because of his braces and the cute little bump on his ear that he'd had since he was born. When Logan arrived, his parents warned him of what he would see, and at first, he couldn't bring himself to go into Matt's room. Matt's parents played his favorite music and brought some of his things from home so that the surroundings would feel familiar. One sad thing I read was that his father searched and searched for a stuffed bunny, Oscar, that Matt carried with him everywhere when he was little, but unfortunately he couldn't find it in time. He did find it later and keeps it with him to this day. Outside of the hospital, the community was showing its support. At the University of Wyoming homecoming parade on October 10th, a silent march was held with over 150 people wearing yellow armbands and holding up signs saying hate is not a Laramie value. Local businesses and even national chains in the town put up signs to let those passing by know that everyone is welcome and hate will not be tolerated. Despite their efforts and hopes, nothing was changing about Matt's condition. They were not only forced to deal with the unimaginable pain of seeing their beautiful baby boy in this way, but they were facing the possibility of having to make the decision of turning off his life support. Judy pulled Walt aside and asked him to do her a favor. She told him that they were ready to let him go, but they didn't have the strength to do it. She said that she could feel that he was holding on for them. She told him that she couldn't tell her baby to let go, but she needed for him to know that it was okay. She asked Walt if he would be the one to tell him, and he agreed. Walt went into Matt's room and told him how much his parents and brother loved him. He told him that they would be okay. He said they knew he was tired of fighting, but they couldn't be the ones to make that call. He told him that it was okay to let go and be at peace. That night, with his mother holding one hand, his brother holding his other hand, and his father standing beside him, he took Walt's advice one last time. Matthew Shepard passed away at 12:53 a.m. on October 12, 1998. On October 12th, Rulon Stacy, president of the Poudre Valley Hospital, announced to the nation through tears that Matthew had died. The same day, President Bill Clinton said, quote, "In our shock and grief, one thing must remain clear. Hate and prejudice are not American values." After his death, there was an outpouring of support. Candlelight vigils were held in big cities and small towns across the country. On October 14th, a vigil was held on the steps of the U.S. Capitol, which was attended by politicians, celebrities, and supporters. Ellen DeGeneres gave a heartfelt, tearful speech. Elton John sent flowers to Matthew's memorial and even attempted to call his parents, but they assumed it was a prank call, so they didn't answer. Barbra Streisand and Madonna made calls to local Laramie offices demanding justice. Matt's memorial service was held on October 16th. It was snowing that day, but it didn't deter those who wanted to pay their respects. So many came out to show support that they had to open up another church across the street. Even with the second church open, some still had to stand outside. Unfortunately, supporters weren't the only ones who came. Matt's funeral was one of the first major media appearances of fucking Fred Phelps, who came out with about a dozen members of his terrorist organization known as the Westboro Baptist Church. Warning, I'm going to use the words. They held up signs that read, "God hates fags," "Matt in hell" with a picture of Matt, "Fag equals anal sex equals death," and "AIDS cures fags." While holding these signs, they were also screaming at Matt's grieving family and friends that they were going to burn in hell for, quote, crying over a fag, and that he got what he deserved. With every ounce of my being, I say fuck these people. Fuck the Westboro Baptist Church. Fuck absolutely anyone who thinks that this kind of behavior is acceptable. And fuck Fred Phelps. I hope that crypt keeper looking motherfucker is rotting in the deepest, darkest circle of hell. Actually, no, my apologies to the crypt keeper. He does not deserve to be compared to that monster. Sadly, they weren't the only horrible people to exist. Matt's family, staff from the Poudre Valley Hospital, and outspoken supporters received hate mail and even death threats. The crime itself and the threats that came after scared many in the community. Other gay students left town or transferred to other schools, saying they were scared to walk down the street. The charges against Russell and Aaron were upgraded to first-degree murder. They were not charged with a hate crime because it was not permissible under Wyoming's criminal law at the time. The charges against Chastity and Kristen were upgraded to accessory after the fact of first-degree murder. Chastity's trial took place first in December of 1998. She pled guilty and was sentenced to 15 to 24 months in jail. Kristen's trial took place last, in November of 1999. She pled guilty to the lesser charge of interfering with an investigation after she struck a deal in exchange for testifying against Aaron. She was sentenced to 6 months in jail, but got credit for the 120 days she had already spent incarcerated while awaiting trial, and the additional 60 days were suspended, so she walked free that day. Russell's trial began on April 9, 1999, and wouldn't you know it, that decrepit son of a bitch Fred and the filth that followed him decided now would be a good time to get out there and spread the good word. Like, not just Fred Phelps, but I don't understand anyone who has that kind of extreme view on religion. Your God is supposed to be the most loving being, yet you spew nothing but venom. However, the light always triumphs the dark. Matt's friend, Romaine Patterson, was ready this time. After his memorial, she suspected that they hadn't seen the last of the Westboro mouth breathers, so she had rallied a group of allies who showed up dressed as angels. They had giant wings made of PVC pipes that stood 10 foot wide and 7 foot high. They formed a line of protection between the terrorists and Matt's family, singing Amazing Grace and other songs at the top of their lungs, so no one had to hear the hatred spilling out of their faces. Fun fact, Romaine went on to form the group Angel Action after this. They have traveled all over the country protecting families and mourners by countering the Westboro Baptist Church's revoltingness with the angels' love and compassion. With the death penalty on the table, Russell's defense attorney, Wyatt Skaggs, reviewed the evidence and decided that the best option would be for his client to plead guilty and agree to testify against Aaron in the hopes of a life sentence. His plea was accepted, and Russell was given 2 life sentences to be served consecutively with no possibility for parole. Aaron McKinney's trial began on October 25, 1999. This piece of fecal matter in human form went into the court cocky as could be, smirking and even winking at the cameras as he walked by. His lawyers knew that the death penalty was also on the table for their client, but instead of trying to plead guilty for a reduced sentence of life in prison, they decided to try the gay panic defense. What the hell is the gay panic defense, Penny? Well, friends, to sum it up, the gay panic defense is a legal strategy that alleges a person's gay, queer, or trans identity threatens someone so much that they have a temporary loss of control that causes them to act violently. It is an actual, disgusting legal defense that in essence blames the victim for the homophobic or transphobic crimes committed against them. In about 30% of cases it has been used in, it has resulted in a reduced sentence. In 2013, the American Bar Association issued a unanimous ruling that the defense should be prohibited, but there is no federal law. It is decided on a state level, and as of today, though very rarely used, 30 out of the 50 United States still consider it a defense. Aaron's lawyers were basically alleging that if Matt had never grabbed Aaron's leg, none of this would have happened. Bullshit. And for the record, just because someone is attracted to your gender does not mean they are attracted to you. Do not flatter yourself, honey. Prosecutor Carl Rurucha objected to the defense, calling it atrocious and stating that it should not be used in any case in any court. Louder for the people in the back, Carl. You go, Carl. Judge Baron Voigt agreed and struck down the pathetic defense strategy. Russell testified against him, Kristen testified against him, and the mountain of evidence spoke for itself. After 10 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict of guilty. When it came time to deliberate on the death penalty, the Shepards stepped in and recommended that he should be given life in Matthew's memory. It was accepted, and on November 25, 1999, Aaron McKinney was sentenced to 2 life sentences to be served consecutively with no possibility for parole, ensuring that he, like Russell, would never step foot outside of a prison again. Addressing Aaron directly, Dennis Shepard said, quote, "On October 12th, my firstborn son and my hero died 50 days before his 22nd birthday, with his mother and his brother holding his hands. He actually died on the outskirts of Laramie when you beat him and left him out there by himself. But he wasn't alone. There were his lifelong friends. First, he had the beautiful night sky, the same stars and moon that we used to look at through the telescope. Then, he had the sunshine to shine on him one more time. One more cool, wonderful autumn day in Wyoming. He had the wind, the ever-present Wyoming wind, for the last time. He had one more friend with him. He had God. I feel better knowing he wasn't alone. Mr. McKinney, I am going to grant you life, as hard as that is for me to do, because of Matthew. Every time you celebrate Christmas, a birthday, or the 4th of July, remember that Matt isn't. Mr. McKinney, I grant you life in the memory of someone who no longer lives. May you have a long life, and may you thank Matthew every day for it." Wow. I want to say that I could be that big of a person, but I honestly don't know if that would be a true statement. Dennis and Judy didn't stop there. They made it their life's work to fight for LGBTQ+ rights in Matthew's memory, saying it's what he would have wanted, and it's what he would have been doing himself if he were still here. After Matt's death, there was an outpouring of public support and demand for hate crime laws to be enacted to protect the gay community. There was enough forward momentum that a bill was introduced, but it didn't get passed. But it did not deter them. Dennis and Judy started the Matthew Shepard Foundation, which raises awareness, provides educational resources and outreach programs, and awards scholarships. Their website, which I will also link in the show notes, states that their mission is to amplify the story of Matthew Shepard to inspire individuals, organizations, and communities to embrace the dignity and equality of all people. Judy, who I found out does not like to be the center of attention and is usually rather quiet, stepped all the way out of her comfort zone to campaign and advocate on a daily basis. She refused to let the conversation stop and demanded that minorities needed to be protected, not demonized or treated as less than. Through the years, many bills were introduced and would make it close to the finish line, but did not end up getting passed. Nevertheless, the Shepards persisted. 11 years after Matt's murder, on October 28, 2009, President Barack Obama signed the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act into law, with Judy and Dennis standing at his side. It was the first federal hate crime statute to include sexual orientation, gender identity, and disability as a protected class. Side note, please don't think I'm skipping over the importance of James Byrd Jr.'s role in this legislation. His case is extremely important, and I have it on my list to cover in the detail he deserves in a future episode. Judy and Dennis held on to Matt's ashes through the years because they were afraid if they ever laid him to rest, his burial site would become a target for homophobic assholes. My words, not theirs. I'm sure they said something much classier. That is, until October 26, 2018. Matt was raised Episcopalian and served as an altar boy. As he got older, he struggled with his sexuality conflicting with his faith, but never abandoned his beliefs. Reverend Gene Robinson, the first openly gay bishop elected into the Episcopal Church, led the ceremony, and the Gay Men's Chorus of Washington, D.C. sang, while Matthew's ashes were interred at the Washington National Cathedral. He was the first person to be laid to rest in the cathedral since Helen Keller, 50 years earlier. Because it is out there and debated upon, I will touch on it. In 2004, 2020 ran a piece produced by Stephen Jimenez that alleges Matt was no angel. Let me stop you right there, buddy. Who is? Besides Romaine Patterson. Does that mean he deserved it? No, wait, he was asking for it, right? But what was he wearing? Okay, I'm sorry. So, they say that it was not a hate crime, but rather a drug-fueled robbery gone wrong due to the meth scene that Matt and Aaron were involved in. Jimenez elaborates on this in The Book of Matt that he published in 2013. In summary, he alleges that Matt is a meth user and large-scale distributor, and that he knew Aaron prior to the attack because the two had occasionally had sex. I can't give you my take because I didn't give the book my time or money. I will just give you the facts. Rob Debris, a detective on the case at the time, said that the book contained factual errors and lies. He stated that this murder didn't look like any meth crime or robbery gone wrong he had ever seen. He said that the claim of Shepard being a drug dealer was truly laughable. He also addresses the level of usage alleged in the book, where Aaron was said to have been using heavily in the days prior to and on the day of the murder. That level would take 2 to 3 weeks to clear out of someone's system. Yet, toxicology ran on all three men at the time of their hospitalizations and/or arrests showed no traces. Although not as credible, both Kristen and Chastity testified during the trials that neither of the men were under the influence of drugs at the time of the murder. Dave O'Malley, the sheriff on this scene where Matt was found, said that if drugs had been involved, they would have investigated that aspect. He said, quote, "The claim that Shepard was a methamphetamine kingpin is almost humorous. Someone who would buy into that would believe almost anything they read." The Matthew Shepard Foundation released a statement in response to the book saying, quote, "Attempts now to rewrite the story of this hate crime are based on untrustworthy sources, factual errors, rumors, and innuendo, rather than the actual evidence gathered by law enforcement and presented in the court of law. We do not respond to innuendo, rumor, or conspiracy theories. Instead, we remain committed to honoring Matthew's memory and refuse to be intimidated by those who seek to tarnish it." All in all, there is absolutely no evidence to back the claims made in the book other than that robbery was a motive. That was clear from the beginning, and it was addressed in the courtroom. They wanted Matt's money, and they got it. He handed it over willingly. It wasn't robbery or any other claim made in that book that killed Matt. It was hatred that killed Matt. Just last month, on May 3rd, 2024, Judy Shepard was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is the nation's highest civilian honor presented to those who have made exemplary contributions to the prosperity, values, or security of the United States, world peace, or other significant societal or private endeavors. Well fucking deserved, Judy. Well fucking deserved. And that, my friends, is the tragic, eye-opening, heart-changing, law-making case of Matthew Shepard. That's all I've got for you today, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss an episode, like next week when we'll be discussing a serial killer who was able to evade capture for decades due to the transient nature of his work. If you're enjoying the show, please make sure to rate and review wherever you're listening. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Criminally Nerdy Podcast, Twitter, X, whatever, at Crime Nerd Pod. Make donations if you're feeling generous at buymeacoffee.com/criminallynerdypodcast. And as always, feel free to shoot me an email anytime at criminallynerdypodcast@gmail.com. Till next time, keep Keep it nerdy. Your mother was a hamster and your father smelt of elderberries. That's Grandma's pet airplane. Working 9 to 5. Fucking fuck. Blech. Nope. Excuse me. Change? Vroom vroom. Damn it. Fucking shit. She doesn't even go here. I can't do this. Ew, as if. You just said it. I'm Betty. Oh, fuck. God damn it. Shit. Motherfucker. Alrighty then. With his mother holding one hand. Matthew Shepard passed away at 12:53 a.m. on October 12th. Oh, fuck.